Vince, I know it's 108 degrees or so in Las Vegas. How you doing, my friend?
Well, is this Dick?
Yes, good to talk to you.
Hi, Dick. It's been a while, hasn't it? Yeah, I'm doing well, thank you. I got to brag. I celebrated my 90th birthday last month, and next month, Frankie and I, Frankie's my wife, her real name is Frances, called her Frankie since she was a little girl. Next month, we celebrate our 67th wedding anniversary.
Wow,
So
wow. And
Thank you.
I happen to know one way you do it is
hello to all the broadcast pioneers.
you do an awful lot of walking out there. The thing that shocks me is when you do your walking.
I'm sorry?
You're walking to stay healthy?
Yeah, still walking,
And doing it at 4:30 or 5 a.m. because of the heat?
Sometimes 4:30 to 5, yeah. If it's bright by that time, the sun is up, and it's wonderful, it really is. It's about 75, 80 degrees, and that's cool here.
Vince, let me just jump over so briefly to the days in Philadelphia. You'd been top rated in Indianapolis, and they recruited you. Come over here in 1958. And how did it turn out?
Well, I was sent to I brought to Philadelphia for one reason. That's to topple John Facette from his perch as number one in the news ratings in Philly. And I accomplished that in 1960 when I took over in January of 1960, took over first place from John. In 1965, Rex Polier, the television critic for the Philadelphia Bulletin, the evening newspaper, said that by all important ratings, Vince Leonard is far and away the one that most viewers tune in for the big 11 p.m. newscast. And he was quoting a rating service executive who makes a specialty of newscaster ratings. And he said this man called our attention to Leonard's high marks and expressed astonishment. So that was pretty nice.
I can understand the astonishment. I am positive that I can remember the research showing that there were times when you had over 50% of the available audience. A little later in the mid-'60s, Eyewitness News was created out of New York, locally here, of course, all the many changes that came into place, all the studio changes, technology, the rest of it. What was it like the first time you had to read a teleprompter?
Well, that was a great pleasure. Well, for years we had our news were in color. Our newscasts were in color starting when I was there in 1960, but not the videotape and all that, but just the studio shots. But it was very nice.
I know many people remember when you'd be at your anchor desk out in front of the Eyewitness News team. This was over at 1619 Walnut Street, and your team members were on risers, let's call them, up behind you. That was quite innovative.
Yeah, they had all different ways and different techniques of getting us to read certain copy, and they'd pin it to the bottom of the camera that was well below the lens, but it worked. Not good, but it worked.
Just to make sure we get this in today before we have to wrap, Vince, at age 18, this is something I always very much respected you for. You volunteered for military service to go in and fight World War II, and obviously we all salute you for that. While you were in, you learned to be a pilot. After the war, you picked up privately flying, and 20, 30 years later, that also helped make you good friends with a fellow who showed up here.
Yeah, you're talking about a guy named Mort, aren't you? Mort Krim.
Mort Krim.
Yeah, Mort and I, we became friends, and he came in 1972, and primarily because of flying. Initially, that cemented our friendship, but then we became good friends. We owned a couple of airplanes together and flew around the country and had a great time. I really admired him, and I still do. We are now very close friends after we both retired.
And I know how much he appreciates getting a chance to see you. We here today very much appreciate hearing from you, hearing how great you sound, and just the voice by itself after all these years. Well, thanks for taking the time, Vince. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dick, and thanks to all the members of the Broadcast Pioneers who are there today. I appreciate it very much.
Mort, good afternoon. Thanks for joining you. Are you home in Jacksonville?
Yes, Dick. How are you today?
Good, my friend. Glad to hear that everything is well with you, especially after 3 years ago when you successfully landed your plane. Things are busy there, I'm sure.
Discovered you don't really need an engine. All you need to do is keep your calm, and it turns into a glider.
And maybe know what you're doing. What a fantastic career you've had, Mort. Obviously, we enjoyed very much the portion of it you shared with us in Philadelphia, starting the 5:30 news, Meeting House. You made some good friends here. We were just talking with Vince, but there were others too.
Well, I'll deny everything Vince said about me.
What you worked?
No, Vince continues to be one of my very best friends, and Reedy and I try to get out and see them at least once a year. They've been to our home in Florida. He and Frankie are just delightful people, and I value the time that I spent in Philadelphia with Marcia Rose and Al Meltzer and the late Bill Custer, the late Jessica Savitch. We had a wonderful team, and you, of course, Dick. It was just a great time to be working in television.
One day, you were long gone. I was over at the Port Authority. You had done a documentary, 20, 30 minutes, the Barry Bridge, how they built it, Betsy Ross, and I was telling the official there, I thought the whole thing really turned out well, and I thought it was especially smart to have you narrate it. He says to me, this is a 20, 30-minute documentary, Mort took it in one cut, one take.
Well, I've always been a little bit lazy. I never like to do things a second time.
I think that might have something to do with the approach to announcing, Mort. Another thing I remember was almost a surprise at the time. You had sort of a punny sense of humor once in a while, just a slight touch on air.
It's a sickness, and I've discovered that you never really recover from it. I still engage in punning with friends of mine on Facebook. Alan Walden, worked with him at WNEW in New York for several years in radio. And Alan is one of my Facebook friends, and he and I are constantly exchanging just awful puns. Vince Leonard, too, is a terrible punster, and he's sent me some that are almost too bad to repeat.
Whoops. I'm getting the rap from Jerry, but let me ask you one quick question, Mort. This was a big surprise to me when comedian Will Ferrell said he was stimulated to create anchorman Ron Burgundy by watching Mort Krim. I can imagine no similarity at all between Ron Burgundy and Mort Krim. How the heck did that happen?
Well, I think I'm much more outrageous than Ron Burgundy, if you really know me. Interestingly enough, Dick, I'm finishing up right now a memoir that's going to be the real Ron Burgundy story, and Will Ferrell was kind enough to write a blurb for it. It's now in the hands of my agent in New York, and I can't give you a publication date, but we thought that all the publicity generated by the Anchorman movies opened the door for telling what it was really like to anchor the news in those wonderful years, the 70s, 80s, and of course, there'll be 2 or 3 chapters on the Philadelphia years, because it was that experience that triggered the Anchorman movies, the Mort Krim, Jessica Savitch, which became the point of takeoff for Ron Burgundy and Corningstone.
Well, I still see a big difference, Mort. Thank you very, very much for taking the time today, and for all of us here, obviously it was great working with you long, long ago. Thank you, Mort.
It's my pleasure, and best of luck to everybody there in Philly. We still value the time spent there. Wonderful people, wonderful memories.
Robin McIntosh, retired Eyewitness newsman. Nothing to it. This all started a couple of weeks ago, actually, when I got a call from Jerry, and actually it wasn't a call, it was an email. I got it on my iPhone. Hi, Robin. I'd like you to be the MC for the Broadcast Pioneers Luncheon on June 17th. It's a celebration of 50 years of Eyewitness News. Can you do it? I hope so. All the best, Jerry. Anyway, it was followed up by a phone call a couple of minutes later. Hi, Robin, it's Jerry. Can you be the MC? I said, Jerry, look, I'm retired, you know. I don't wear ties anymore. I don't wear jackets anymore. I don't get up in front of people anymore and talk. He said, please. I said, please. He said, you get a free lunch. I said, I am your man. I am. Free lunch, free dessert, fabulous. Anyway, looking forward to this event, and I have been looking forward to quite some time. I always told people when I was working, Robin McIntosh, CBS 3, Eyewitness News. It was Eyewitness News when I started. And somehow or another along the line, Eyewitness News is still in there, but we've changed the name several times to The Direct Connection, The News Tonight, all these different things. But right down in our soul of souls at Channel 3, it will always be Eyewitness News. And it's because of this man right here, our Hall of Famer this year, Primo. He is the father, and I told him earlier, face to face, you are the godfather of Eyewitness News. He came up with this great concept of turning reporters into TV personalities. Before that time, it was Vince Leonard, John Facenda. They were the frontmen for the news. He decided he was going to send out reporters with camera crews and make them personalities. Trudy Haynes, Jim Donovan, Pat Cherokee, Dick Sheeran, Marcia Rose. Even Marcia Rose was a reporter at one time. But obviously a legend as far as being an anchor. But we're here today to celebrate, and it is a celebration. As a matter of fact, part of the words here, I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning yesterday morning, out of bed, for a different reason than what I usually get up at 4 o'clock in the morning for at my age. And I said to myself, you know, in his invitation, Jerry said celebration. And I want this to be a celebration. He said, well, you know, we'll have a panel and you'll sort of wing it. I said, that's fine. The panel is terrific. But I also want this to be a party. So my wife and I went out yesterday to the dollar store and bought 20 balloons, bought hats, and I cannot thank you, the folks who are putting them on, to get into the spirit of this party. And thank you. There are some noisemakers here, and it's a beautiful day out, and if you're going to come inside on a beautiful day, let's have a party for Eyewitness News. A party for all of these people. When I was here doing these sorts of things, I'd always say, I'm Robin McIntosh, Channel 3, the station that's number 1 in the ratings, number 2 sometimes, too often, number 3 in the ratings. But always first in your hearts. And the reason I say that is names like Vince Leonard, Mort Krim, Jessica Savitch, Carol Erickson, Trudy Haynes, Jim Donovan, Marcia Rose, Pat Cherokee, Dick Sheeran, Dick Standish, Mike Strug. I could name the people here, Tom LeMaine. I mean, these are names who have worked at this station for years and left an indelible impression on not only the station, but on the city of Philadelphia. And the best part was they were not only the people who were giving people the news, they were their friends. And after all those years, that's the way I felt when I retired after 40 years with Channel 3, starting out as a copy boy, getting a break that I probably never should have gotten from a news director who looked at me and said, you know what, I saw you on TV the other night when they did a feature story on me being a summer policeman at the shore. Jack Helsel back in 1971 doing a story on the rare side about this new thing called college boys who were out being summer cops at the shore. Well, I was one, and I was also working part-time at the shore as a summer cop, and I was working part-time up here as a copy boy. And Jack said, look at this thing, college kids, summer cops. I said, I'm one. He said, get out. He said, yeah, I'll go down and do a story on you sometime. Well, he did. 15-minute segment of On the Rare Side. And the news director saw it, called me into his office, said, McIntosh, you look terrible on television. I'm going to make you a reporter. But that is what Eyewitness News was all about. It gave opportunities to young kids coming in here. Many of them moved on to much bigger places. Many of them moved on to other markets. And it's all because a guy named Primo started this concept of having people get on television and become somebody. And 40 years later, I was able to retire, living on a very nice after pension.
Yeah, let's hear it for that.
I'm a very, very lucky man. But today we're here to celebrate Eyewitness News. I have a great panel here. First question I'd like to ask you guys is, this is a party. Why should we have a party for Eyewitness News? Dick?
Well, first off, if we're going to have a party, you're going to buy everybody a drink?
I ain't Scottish for nothing.
Yeah, dollar store hats, come on.
Hey, they fit. Look at Jerry's got his on.
Well, I think one of the reasons is we had a ball. I mean, there were a lot of serious stories, but we had a lot of fun stories. And it was really a tremendous place to work, and still is. And I want to tip my hat to the young reporters who are on there now, doing a great job. And I think they're carrying on in a fine tradition.
I agree.
And I was really honored to be part of it.
Pat Cherokee,
So why should we celebrate, or why are
we having a party for Eyewitness? Why do you think Eyewitness News deserves a party?
Well, I think because we are really an original. I mean, when you look around and you look at those of us who have been on the air here at Channel 3, and it really is, even though we have branded it CBS 3, we still are Channel 3, aren't we? Yes. I mean, that's really what we call it.
We're KYW.
Yeah, we're Channel 3. And with that, I think we presented ourselves as originals in the way that we do things. We brought the cameras into people's places of work, onto the streets, to tell the eyewitness story. We became eyewitnesses, and the community then watching us became eyewitnesses as well. I mean, so I really think not just an original, but I think we really created the brand.
Marcia Rose.
Well, thank you. It's very hard to top Dick and Pat, and I agree with what both of them said. I think it's also, we look at what news is today, and we look at the diminishment of newspapers and the diminishment of magazines, and of television too, as we used to know it. And those of us who are sitting up here, Al and Trudy and myself, feel kind of like dinosaurs as we look back on what's happening. And we look back to what we then thought of as the golden days and the glory days. And they really were. We loved going to work. We loved what we were doing. We believed in what we were doing, and we believed in each other. We had a wonderful sense of camaraderie. Sure, there were the little snipes along the way, but overall, it was a warm and loving team. And in today's chaotic world, that's something wonderful to celebrate.
Thank you, Marcia Rose. Mr. Primo.
Well, I think that one of the most important things is that we tried to create a family, a news family, and we sent out that signal of family to all the families that watched our show. And as you know, in Philadelphia and New York, places like that, you have a lot of people living alone, no relatives, transition, and what they found was a family to watch every night at 6 and 11, and that's a great contribution, I think, to broadcasting today.
Thank you. Trudy Haynes.
Well, thank you. Everyone has said all of the wonderful things, but I think the testimony comes from the people. And I go through the streets a lot. I ride the bus, I ride SEPTA. Any SEPTA people here? Me. Okay, I ride SEPTA quite a bit. And I get people coming up to me and say, gee, we miss the old team. We miss the way you used to do news. We miss the way you came into our homes. And what are they doing today? We don't like it. These are the remarks that I hear. Where is Marcia Rose? Where is Orion Reed? Where is Jack Jones? I mean, they've passed, but through the years, this is what I've been hearing. Where is Robin McIntosh? What happened to him? So I think people remember not only that we were first in doing many things, but they were lasting and they were concrete. So if you have any ideas, if there are any producers here, that want to do things go back to the old ways we gave news. Going into the home, being a part of it, and being first, thanks to Al Primo.
And if anyone knows anything about consuming news, it's CBS 3's consumer reporter, Jim Donovan. Jim, why do you think Eyewitness News deserves a party today?
I'm still fixated on the pension that you were talking about before.
It's probably not that far away, believe me.
I've got a retirement calculator on my clock, on my phone. You know, I think I always joke with people because I give quite a number of tours to visitors that come to the station all the time. And I describe it lovingly as the land of misfit toys. We're all so bizarre and unique and have quirky little things about our personalities, and you would never think of putting these creative people in one place. And we scream at each other and we have temper tantrums, but you know what? Every day we get it on the air. No matter what happens, we come back day after day. Someone once asked me, what does KYW stand for? And I said, killing yourself willingly. We show up every day and we try to do our very best, and you know, the next day we come back and do it all over again. And I think that's what's the great thing about television news. No matter who says we're, you know, on our way out, just like they said the newspapers, I still get a newspaper every day. And you know, we just enjoy ourselves, and I think the audience appreciates that.
And I'd call that a party.
Mm-hmm.
Every day it's a party. Anybody who's been in the television news business understands the world of war stories. War stories are the stories that you tell people years after you've worked there. What people come up to you and say, well, what was your favorite thing? Well, what was it like working there? And everybody in TV has one or two stories that are their war stories that sort of sum it up. And Dick Sheeran has a great war story he tells. He used to tell me every morning when we get together and have coffee and talk about the day's events and our conspiracies about how we were going to get on the air by the end of the day. Yeah. Dick, what's a good war story?
Of course, my war story always involves food. That was my favorite subject. The year is 1980. Jimmy Carter's in the White House. The Iranians are holding our people hostage. He can't go out to campaign, so he called reporters to his office. And I was one of three from our station chosen to go. And before I give you the rest of the story, in Atlantic City, there's a hoagie shop called the White House. Very famous. Yes, I've had many, you could tell. So I called my wife and I said, I'm going down to the White House tomorrow. She said, really? She said, yeah, bring me back 2 cheese subs. That is my... She's been a Gracie Allen in our 53 years of marriage. The other day she said she wanted to go to Wolfman Puck's restaurant. I'm going to let that set in. But that's my favorite story. We all have quite a few, but I'm going to stop there.
Good one. Patricia, do you have any good war stories you can tell us?
Well, the one thing that I think was probably the most unusual was in Rome, so it was 2005. It was John Paul's funeral. And we had been covering it from the time that he had actually passed. So we had been in St. Peter's Square. And so you continue to try to do a story that looks a little bit different than everybody else's story. And I mean, what can you do with the man with the brown shoes being carried across St. Peter's Square? But it was really late at night, and I was trying to figure out some way to be able to get the other angle of the story. Essentially, how could we get into St. Peter's and shoot the people walking up to the casket for John Paul? Because of a connection at the John Newman Shrine, I ended up running into this priest on the street, and he said, I asked him what he was going to be doing later on, and he said, well, as a matter of fact, I'm going into St. Peter's to pray at the feet of the Pope. And I said, well, how are you going to do that? He goes, I have connections. I said, okay. I said, do I have connections too? Because you have connections? And he said, absolutely. Meet me at a gate, a particular gate, at the bottom of this ramp, and I'll take you in there. So I was with my photographer, Adam Fox. He had a very small camera because a great big camera would have really gotten lots of attention. And we weren't supposed to be inside. And we work our way, this is a Monsignor who moves us through, and we keep crossing guards. And they keep looking at him, and he nods, and they smile, and he keeps saying, "They're with me. They're with me. They're with me." And we find ourselves walking through the back halls of St. Peter's Basilica. I mean, really, it's a narrow, narrow hall, couple of little odd-shaped doors on either side. When we come out through the other side, and I mean, my heart's racing, because I think for sure the Swiss guard is going to come after us. I get to this one entranceway, the door opens up, and we really, literally, are at the head of John Paul. I mean, it was pretty amazing. We were able to shoot it. If you remember the pictures when John Paul was laid out at St. Peter's, there were a couple of rows of pews. A row, in fact, where President Bush had knelt to pray. Well, it was right there is where we were. And we got, probably one of the most extraordinary aspects of a story that you could imagine, where people were coming up with their cell phones. They weren't doing selfies as much then, which would have been pretty terrible. But they were taking pictures of the Holy Father there, in his last moments of anybody seeing him. So that was really pretty remarkable. What a
Pretty
story
remarkable
that
story.
is.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Incidentally, I think we can all thank Pat because the current Pope, Pope Francis, said, "I'm not coming to Philadelphia unless Pat Shiraki is going to be there for my visit." So it's going to be a great September thanks to Pat. Marcia Rose, I'm sure you have a war story. She worked with a guy named Tom Snyder who...
I can't tell any of those war
I know
stories.
you can't.
Can't tell them. And Pat's story is remarkable. But my favorite story, and some of you may have heard it, antedates the news, which was I wanted very much to do news, and I went to our then general manager and said, "Please, sir, I would like to do the news." I was doing documentaries, and I was doing a talk show. And he said, "A woman will do news over my dead body. Women are not authority figures, and they don't have good voices." So somewhere he's spinning, and that's one of my favorite stories.
And where is he? Where is he today? Al?
Well, that same general manager told me that story, and I said, "I don't believe it." Let's do it. And we did. My story is about the time that I was sitting in my office, and I get a call from Air Force One, and this was when I was in the New York part of my career, and it was the press secretary calling and saying, "Yes, you can come to Camp David and interview the president." And this was like unbelievable because I was producing the Reasoner Report, which was ABC's and trying to be ABC's answer to 60 Minutes. It was only 30 minutes long, but we did fly up to Camp David, and lo and behold, the Secret Service insisted on taking the cameras apart, and every cameraman here knows what that's all about, to take the camera out, and they wanted to open it up and take all the batteries out and so forth, and we finally talked them out of that, but we did get past the launch pad, which is where, to this day, no one has ever gotten into Camp David upstairs, where we got to go, and Gerald Ford was the president, and he was thinking about running for a second term, so I'm sure that was the motivation behind it. And it was a wonderfully set up thing where he came down, smoking his pipe and being one of the boys, and we all sat down, and the dog comes running down a little bit later, and Betty Ford starts to show up a little bit later, and we did a great interview. Harry Reasoner was the interviewer, and strangely enough, and this is a talent type story, is here's a guy that, we thought, just knew everything, and he kept saying, "Do I have all the right questions? Let's go over the questions again. Let's go over the questions again." But we did get a fine interview there, and that's, to this day, no one's been into that camp, and that's my story.
Excellent, good one. Trudy, as you spent your career interviewing stars, and you must have one somewhere in there.
Well, I guess one of the first ones was interviewing Joan Crawford, who was quite a big star in those days. And when she came to the studio, in fact, before she came into the studio, her, what would you call the person who comes in front of you, you know, to check things out, to make sure that the sun came in, well, we didn't have any sun down there, but the lights were in the right direction, that the color of the walls favored her, what she was going to wear. And it was quite a preparation for her to come. And when she finally did come, Joan Crawford was made up like Dolly, with the hair and the makeup and the eyelashes and the jewelry. And she was very, very nervous. And we had that row-type office where we sat in rows to do interviews. So she was in like a little school seat next to me. And we did this over a desk. Remember that, Masha Rose? And we did the interview. And when we went downstairs, she was leaving. And she sent me back a note. Thank you. You made me feel welcome. This was my first television interview. Wow. So we accomplished that, but I'd like to say one other thing. All through the time that I was with KYW, I was having wars with some of the people that didn't expect me, that worked with me. And I want to say today, most of those people that I worked with who were questioning who was Trudy Haynes, what I was going to do, could I make it? They today gave me a hard time then sometimes, but today they have welcomed me. And I want to thank you for being that open, broad-minded, and I certainly want to thank Pioneers for this organization for inducting me into the Hall of Fame. I'm sure I was probably one of their first two.
Hear, hear.
Thank you.
Hear, hear. Jim Donovan looks like a young guy, but he's been in the business for a number of years, and I'm sure you've got a war story or two, Jim.
I've been punched, I've been hit, I've been strangled with a microphone cord, I've had people pull knives on me, tried to run me over twice with cars, one was a Hummer. But the most dangerous thing about my job, what I always tell people, is the hidden cameras. Because the hidden cameras have a tendency, when I'm involved, to not only break, but also do major damage to objects, including myself. So one of the first stories that I did when I came to Philadelphia, we were trying to expose a modeling company scam where people were going in and paying to be successful models. And you had to pay several $100s. So I got wired up with the hidden camera and headed over to this location to get this undercover video by myself. Fortunately, I stopped at Taco Bell. I was starving. So I got a Taco Bell on the way over there. I was eating the taco when I got into the place. And I sat down and I started going through my modeling interview so that I could be a superstar. And the man didn't recognize me, and we were talking for about 15 minutes, and all of a sudden I started feeling this burning sensation on my chest. The camera was starting to overheat, and the wires were starting to melt. And he's filling out paperwork and talking about, asking me if I have a passport and stuff like that. And all of a sudden I smelled this wisp of smoke. It starts coming out from my undershirt. And I thought, I'm on fire. I'm on fire, but I need this video. So I just kind of, so the man's looking down. At this point, now I start sweating. And I mean, the sweat's pouring off of me, and I'm trying to think, okay, I can't lie. We're not allowed to lie because this is all on tape. Our attorney would have a field day. So finally I said, I am so sorry. I said, but I had Mexican food, and is there a restroom around here? And he looks, he's like, sure, go that way, that way. I'm in the restroom, patting out the fire, trying to get the wires off of me. And then when I came back, I said, I think we need to reschedule. I said, I'm really not feeling well. But I had a big mark. I still have a slight little scar from the hidden cameras. So, but we got that story on the air. The guy went to jail.
Well done. Well done. Good story. Now, even I have a war story, which brought up this whole idea of war stories. I was working on a Sunday afternoon because I was always the perpetual new guy. So you work Sundays, okay? So Sunday afternoon, I'm out with my crew and I got a call on the two-way. Go over to 30th Street Station. There's a train coming down from New York, Grand Central Station, going down to Washington because they're going to tear down Grand Central Station, and these are architectural aficionados who want to save Grand Central Station. But it's a 30-second thing. I mean, you know, we're from Philly. What do we care about Grand Central Station? You just go down, shoot the 30 seconds, and, you know, bring it back. I said, okay. So we go down to 30th Street, park the truck, go down underground. The train rumbles in. We're standing on the platform. People come out. They've got the sign, Save Grand Central Station, and we're shooting, you know, Save Grand Central Station. And I put the microphone under a guy's. Yeah, we got to save Grand. Right, perfect. Just what I need. We're about ready to go, and I look down the train. There are a bunch of people standing in front of a window, and they're looking in the window like this, and they're tapping and they're waving, and I'm going, who the heck are they talking to? So I walked down, and I said to my light guy, would you shine a light in this thing? Because they were like smoke glass windows. It was a train. And I got my nose down like this, and the guy turns the light on, and I'm like this to this with Jackie Kennedy Onassis. And she looks at me, and I look at her, and I went, can you come outside and talk to me for a little bit? You know, microphone. And she says, okay. So she walks down the aisle of the train, comes out the door, and I'm standing on a platform. We're the only crew there, because who wants to cover Grand Central Station? Anyway, she walks over to me, and I said, Mrs. Onassis, I said, do you hope this demonstration will save Grand Central Station? You know, brilliant questioner that I am. And she turns to me and says, hope so. She turns on her heel and walks back into the train. So anyway, I build a story around Jackie Kennedy and the pictures and cut to my one bite, hope so. Anyway, next morning, it's Monday morning. I go into work. Maria Shriver was working at our place as an intern and a producer. We didn't have interns in those days. She was a producer, junior grade producer. And I walked past her desk and I said, Maria, I said, I interviewed your aunt yesterday afternoon at 30th Street Station. She said, you did? She said, what did she say? And I said, hope so. She said, 2 words? I said, yeah, just 2 words. She said, well, that's a lot more than most people get. So that was my brush with greatness. That's on my resume. I interviewed Grace Kelly. That's another story. I interviewed Henry Kissinger. That's another story. But I think everyone here has had their moments with great people, even if you just speak with them for a little bit. I just spoke with Marcia Rose in the back room, talking with her. I used to be her copy boy. And if I, ever thought that one day, the 50th anniversary of Eyewitness News, that her 19-year-old copy boy would be one day interviewing her as a colleague, I would have just told you you're out of your mind. Anyway.
Yeah, I have a follow-up to your story about Maria Shriver. It was her first job out of school when she came to Channel 3. And I was sent out to do some sweeps pieces in LA, and she was assigned to assist me. Well, we had a meeting at the Sunset Boulevard Hotel coffee shop, and once we decided what we were going to do for the week, I leave the coffee shop, and as I'm walking out, this rather large fellow walks by me to her table. Well, I guess we have something going on here. And of course, the story is that for 1 week, the governor was my chauffeur because he lived in Santa Monica. He was Mr. Universe at the time, and he knew where things were. And we rented a car, and he drove Maria and I. The crew had a separate car. We hired a crew. And he did help me produce one piece on Muscle Beach in Venice, California. I don't know if you're familiar with that. People work out on the beach. And of course, when I first got there, they didn't want any parts of TV. So Maria and Arnold are sitting nearby. I said, you're Mr. Universe, go over and talk to these guys. Well, of course, one word from him, and that was it. I was there. And of course, I will add that's the last time I appeared on camera topless. The news director said, I never, ever want to see that again.
Robin.
Yes, Trudy.
I have one to follow that a little bit.
Okay.
Maria Shriver brought Arnold into the studio one day. I was doing the noon show. and we asked him to be on the show. And he said, "Where do I sit?" And they brought out a chair to sit next to me. He came right over. Now I'm already on the set. Came right over to me, picked me up, and carried me to the other chair. So I
How many
think
people can say that?
Maria Shriver has left some steps behind her with Donald. Okay.
Well, my Maria Shriver story is they sent me over to Wanamaker's. There was this new book out by this bodybuilder named Schwarzenegger. And they said, again, a little 30-second thing, don't worry about it. Well, we go over to the Crystal Tea Room, and Arnold Schwarzenegger is there. But at the time, is, as you say, Mr. Universe. He wasn't, they said, well, we're having a news conference. So he sits down at the end of this table. There were like 3 cameras there, and we're interviewing him. And he said, I understand you're going to be in a movie coming up. He says, yes, I'm going to be in a movie. And I said, this guy is not going to make it in Hollywood. He can't speak English, for crying out loud. I am going to be starring in a show called the Conan the Barbarian. I said, yeah, right, you're going to go far. So anyway, afterwards, the PR girl says, you want to stay for lunch? I said, yeah, sure, I got a half hour. So we said, I'm ending up sitting right next to Arnold Schwarzenegger at the time, Mr. And he turns to me and says, you work at Channel 3? I said, yeah, I do. You know a girl there by the name of Maria Shriver? Thank God I said, yes, I know her and I like her, because if I had said anything else, it would have been trouble. Anyway, I go back to the station with the film, and about a half an hour later, the elevator opens on the 2nd floor, and out comes Arnold. And Maria Shriver got out of her desk and walked over and gave him a hug. And as you say, that was the beginning of the beginning months of their relationship. But again, those are the war stories that make us all remember what we did and be proud of. And realize just how lucky we were to be involved in all this. How much more we got here, Jer? We gonna go for a while?
15, 20 minutes.
Oh, 15, 20 minutes? We can do that.
I was just, excuse me. I was just remembering in the early days when we started, George Caldwell and I were co-anchoring the 7 o'clock evening newscast. And we had every Friday and Monday a special appearance by Jim Leeming, who was our sports director, a terrific guy. And on Fridays, he would predict the outcomes of the games. On Monday, we would have Monday quarterbacking, and we would see how well he had done. This one Monday, he had to confess, he was off. I mean, he was just way off. And George Caldwell turned to me and said, for God's sakes, Marcia Rose could have done better than that. I saw the light go on in Al Primo's office at that point when the show was over. And from then on, every Friday, Jim Leeming would pick his picks, and I would pick my picks. And then on Monday, we would see what had happened. And I kept winning because I picked the uniforms I liked better, the eye color I liked better. I was born in St. Louis, so I liked the St. Louis team. I mean, and Leeming, who had been a really good friend, seemed more and more distant because he used to walk into a bar where all his friends were, and they would say, "You gonna let that broad beat you?" And it was fun television, but it was the end of a beautiful relationship.
Well, those were the days with television. Everything was new. Yeah. Because, now, I was watching TV yesterday, hot day, broiling day. I turn on Brand X, Channel 6, watching Channel 6, and there is Norman Mushanek interviewing guys out with hard hats on working outside. I did that story 40 years ago. The same guys, or at least their grandsons, telling the same, oh yeah, we got to rest, and we wear hats, and we drink lots of water. And I said, here it comes. Here comes the ice house. And the next shot is the guy who works in the ice cream factory on the hottest day. Oh, it's too cold in here. I can only stay in here for so long. And reporting live from wherever the heck she was, I'm so-and-so, and I could have just... But in our day, I mean, back in the 60s, this was all new. This was all new equipment. We had TV, 16 millimeter cameras, which in hindsight are very heavy, but in those days, you could put them on your shoulder and carry them. The old days, Pro 600s, they were powered off a car battery, and you'd put it on a tripod and it didn't move anywhere. But these were the days where everything was new. Every idea you came up with, whether it was going against Jim Leeming or anything else, or the energy warden, or the suburban bureau chief, or the entertainment reporter or the consumer reporter. I mean, I was Captain, what was I?
Captain America?
No, you were the energy
I was
warden.
the energy warden.
And I was the captain, no, the inflation, the Captain Inflation. And they gave me a Superman suit with a cape, and they put a blue tarp down on the ground, took the TV cameras, and ran a film, an aerial film looking down, and some guys had wings or some wires on my cape and pulled it back, and I ran, look, up in the sky, no, it was Inflation Man. It's Inflation Man. And I jumped down, you know, I'm here to fight inflation. I was here to, you know, like the consumer guy, save you money during the days of double-digit inflation.
Jim wouldn't be caught dead in the Superman.
But that was something new, and it was, you know, you could do anything, and it was okay. And we had a guy here, and God bless his memory, Dave Neal, who worked at all 3 stations, and he was the idea man behind so many ideas, so many of these things that we got people into the tent to watch, you know, Eyewitness News or even Action News or any of the other ones, because everything we did was new. And I'm afraid those days are kind of over.
I can remember when I was the news director, then I had the idea that, you know, what can we do, you know, to pump up the weather a little bit. So I went to the engineering department and got them to put a camera on the top of the building at Walnut Street to take a picture of the flag that flies over City Hall.
Right.
And it was the worst camera in the world because you could barely make out the flag, but all the current stats and so forth, we used to lay over that live camera, and that was just great. Well, of course, nowadays it's unbelievable. And the other big thing that sticks out of my mind is the Mike Douglas show was down in the basement. And, you know, they really had world-class guests there all the time and all the rest of it. And so one day, Richard Nixon's coming to town, and they have him on the show. And, of course, I have the crew. I said, you know, I want it from the airport, you know, to the when he comes in, when he comes out, just everybody. So we get all of that, and all of a sudden I get a call from a guy named Roger Ailes, and I'm saying, what's up? He says, hey, you know, you can't use that stuff. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, you know, this show's not going to be on the air for like a week because they tape the show and then they'd send it by bicycle, you know, to all 50 of their stations. But, you know, that show would be on 4 weeks from now or 2 weeks. So we had a big to-do about that. And thank God for Fred Walker, the general manager. I went up and said, listen, we got to put this on. So I got permission to put it on, but I did not earn the friendship of Roger Ailes, who still doesn't forgive me for that.
It's not a loss.
You know, Rob, what makes Eyewitness News special is that Channel 3 was first with a lot of things. First with the early evening news, moving it up, the morning news. We had a New Jersey bureau with a real office, and I remember
Jim Collis, you remember that?
Yeah,
We
we got to places in South Jersey that hadn't seen a camera ever, a TV camera, and for example, where a formal dinner was a 6-pack of Schmitz and a Slim Jim. That's how deep it was. Yeah, really. And you know, following up on Pat's story about Rome, in the 70s, 6 of us went over to Rome to cover the canonization of Bishop Newman. And we actually took a truck over. And we were driving it all over Rome. And the way it was lettered, the Italians thought we were selling jeans out of the back. People say, do you have size such and such? But the very idea, on the big stories, Eyewitness News owned the stories. And that's what made it very special. And it continues. Of course, the economics have changed. I don't know if we'd send a truck over to Rome these days, but...
Well, and I mean, to follow up on that, talking about the second saint who then was canonized, Greg Meyer and I covered that. Greg, wave. There he is, okay. And we went with some portable equipment, you know, his camera, the tripod, all of that, an editing equipment, an editing deck. What else did we bring? Was that it? And batteries, and a lot of batteries and a lot of tapes. Yeah, now with covering, so that was the canonization of Catherine Drexel. And then a couple of years ago, when we covered the resignation of Benedict, by the way, when I got that phone call at 6 o'clock in the morning from the executive producer in the morning, he said, you know, I need such and such a phone number. And I said, why? He goes, well, the Pope just resigned. I said, popes don't resign. He's dead? No, he resigned. He resigned. First time in 600 years. And when we did that story, the equipment was smaller and smaller and smaller, you know, with a couple of discs that we brought with us. So, you know, it's amazing how technology has really changed. And now when we have Francis in Philadelphia, we'll see, I mean, we may be with, you know, Jim and his iPad shooting something in the middle of the crowd.
During storm coverage last year, all of my reports were done using my iPhone. Seriously. My producer held the phone. I bought a $60 extension microphone. I got the mic flag, put it on, and we were on TV more than some of the reporters were because we were able to move quickly. We shot 45-second stories, emailed them back to the station, and then went to the next place as opposed to having to stay in one spot. So
Technology.
Yeah.
And it's in another 10 years from now, they'll look back at you and say, you know, steam-powered television.
Exactly,
The way you're
exactly.
looking back at us and going, steam-powered television.
More than technology, I just wanted to do a shout out for Channel 3. I think their coverage of the storms and any kind of disaster is phenomenal. And they have reporters every conceivable place, and they move them around. And technology, sure, but it's planning and thinking and wanting to do the story.
One of the basic concepts that we set out with Eyewitness News was to absolutely own the story. When you determine that this is a story that the audience has high interest, you make sure that you have it on every newscast, every day, weekends, morning, noon, night, so that the audience says, that story, whatever it was, can be seen at Channel 3. You know, you'll see it. I did the same, talking about Jackie Kennedy, when she first moved to New York, I was the news director at Channel 7. We had a cameraman outside that apartment building every morning when she got into the car and wherever she went. But just 20 seconds, you know, this is what she did today.
And New Yorkers love it. New Yorkers
loved
loved it.
They loved it.
You think New Yorkers are these very sophisticated people, and for the most part they are. But when it comes right down to it, they're just like you and me. They love the fact that Jackie Kennedy and all these people, these world-renowned names, are living in their town. You know, it's New York. You know, and it just reinforces their. And I'm sure the people who watched it, love it. And now, you know, I'm seeing some hands. I think that's a good idea. Why don't we turn some of this over to some questioning? If anybody has some questions to the living legends of Channel 3, Eyewitness News, and Philadelphia, for that matter. Any questions? Yes.
Yeah, when the first move incident happened, I mean, Robin covered that as well, but you were on the morning with me also?
I was at the
Or
hospital.
you were at the hospital?
I was actually with Ramona Africa the day before and bouncing some of those kids on my knee on Osage Avenue.
Right, yeah,
the night
explain
before.
that, because, go ahead, Robin, explain that, and then I'll say where I picked up.
Well, I mean, you know, the move is one of the largest tragedies, biggest tragedies in the history of the city. But, you know, when you're a reporter, you get a special relationship because you cover the people from Move. Ramona Africa, I knew her for months before this happened, and we talked back and forth. And, you know, the night before, police were on both ends, and we could just stroll up Osage Avenue and go over to the compound, and guys were there, hey, how's it going? You know, the kids had come over and you know, play around at your feet. Ramona Africa came out and talked. The civil disobedience guys were down this end and down this end, and there we were, not knowing that within 24 hours that entire area would be, you know, decimated. But
Yeah, and I was anchoring that early morning, and then it was really one of the first times that I had ever done extended morning coverage. And so we had, Walt Hunter was in the field, who is, phenomenal. In fact, Walt just celebrated his 35th anniversary yesterday at Channel 3. So a big round of applause for him on that. You don't get any better than him in a breaking news situation. And the dearly departed Jack Jones. And it was really a scary time. And those of us who watched all of that, we know what happened. The thing that's so fascinating is that the other day, I was back on Osage Avenue for the 30th anniversary. And at the end of that day, I was with Ramona Africa and had interviewed her, asking her, how she's doing, what her points of view are now, how she sees life back in that area, and whether, how difficult it has been for her as an activist, yes, but also as a family member to have lost so many people.
You're here. Technology, we were just talking about technology, and there certainly is a lot of it. Channel 3, for a number of years, had its own helicopter, and I was fortunate enough to be in it maybe 2 or 3 times a week. Bobby Kravitz was the guy every night over at Channel 6 and Chopper 6. We were in Skycam 3, and that was a very useful tool. I remember one time we were flying back from Cape May doing a story. We were flying over the Delaware Bay, and I said, "Oh, this is that area where the nude beach is." So the pilot says, "Yeah, I know exactly where it is." They said, "Well, maybe we ought to do a little research." So he says, "Yeah, okay." So we come down and we're flying over the nude beach, stick right, and me, the cameraman, and the pilot are all like this, Cloudy day, nobody on the beach, of course, but we're doing research. I happen to look up, and coming at the same altitude is a fixed wing Piper Cherokee, and their stick left, and everybody on board is out this way, going this way. I poked the pilot in the ribs, and I said, "Look!" And he goes, "Oh my God, boom!" And the other guy peels off the other way, but both of them I literally looked across at the pilot, and the guy's like this. And I said, I could see that headline the next morning. Skycam 3 crashes in a head-on over nude beach.
Yeah, over the nude
When you think about what could have been.
Speaking of technology, how many times did we put the film in the processor?
How many times did I go out?
Lose the stories.
The way you knew that film was in the camera was it would be fed back through the pots, and the sound man was supposed to do that. Well, we had sound men sometimes who would carry the pots in their hands, they put them on their belts, they'd carry the microphone out here, because it was a given, until after you spent 8 hours shooting a story, and the cameraman would reach into the black bag to change the film, and he put his hand in, and he gave you this. What, Eric? We just spent all day shooting with no film in the camera.
By the way,
Now, who's going to call the news director and tell them he just spent a day's worth of pay on a sound man, a cameraman, and a reporter, and gas, and time, and overtime, and tell them ain't no film in the camera? That wasn't a good day.
that nude beach was in Villas, and I covered it on the ground later.
That was the
Much better
second time
view.
they told him not to take his shirt off.
Right.
That's not all.
You missed it.
Okay, we
You
have some
missed
questions.
it.
I apologize.
I hope it's all right to ask about this, but for picture voters, there are times when in news business, sometimes a news person becomes the story. And I think I'm certainly with Jessica Savitch. And I was wondering if those of you who have worked with her or business about her.
Well, I don't think you're going to hear anybody say anything bad about Jessica Savitch, but we all at one point, I think, worked with her. Dick?
Well, I kind of have a special story about Jessica. One day she mentioned that she was looking for somebody to do some work on her clothes. And my dear mother worked at Wanamaker's at the Tribute shop with lots of expensive gowns. And so I said, you might go down to 17th and Passyunk, where my mother and dad resided, and she did. And being an Italian mother, she, of course, made some good food. And of course, that wasn't the first time Jessica went down to have her clothes adjusted and eat. Now, the first time she got married, the nuptials were at the Plaza in New York City. Well, we all thought, I guess, we'd all get an invitation. Well, guess who got the invitation? I didn't get one, but my mother and father did. And we drove them up, and of course, while they were in having a fine time at the Plaza at the wedding, my wife and I drove around Manhattan till they were ready to come out of the reception. So, she really enjoyed her trips to South Philly and those meals, and it was a very special time for her and for Mom too. That's one of my stories with Jessica.
Good one.
Yeah.
But, Pat, did you work? You didn't work with Jess, did you? No.
No, but, watched, just like I watched Marcia Rose. To sit in the same chair at noon that Marcia Rose sat in is really a great honor for me. And she knows that, and every time I say it, I tear up a little bit, because it's who would ever have imagined?
I tear up too.
No, it's very special.
But Jessica succeeded me in the news when I went to New York to work for NBC in New York. And we were friendly, and the station was not really being very aware of the talent they had. And so my husband, Jerry Shestak, went to bat and got her a raise.
Ah, there you go. Good Jess story. There you go. Yes.
What happens when your producer tells you to cover something and you don't want to do it, and you know it's a waste of time and it's stupid? Do you get any vote in the matter?
Do you remember this being a democracy at any
Right,
point?
did you ever have a vote? Robin, did you ever have a vote? Dick,
no.
did you ever have a vote?
The vote was do I
No.
work
Did
or
Pat,
starve?
Did you ever have a vote? No. Marcia Rose, did you ever have a vote? She probably had a vote. Yeah. She had lots of vote. And
Trudy?
Jim, no vote.
I have veto power in the newsroom. If I don't want to do something, I don't do it, and they usually leave me alone.
Oh, good for you.
I also have a stuffed dog named Sebastian, so if I walk around the newsroom with that, they know not to piss me off. So that's a nonverbal sign that I'm not having a good day, and leave me alone.
Trudy? Any Jess stories? Jessica? Savitch?
No, I knew her, but I didn't
Yeah.
get very close, no.
Robin, I never met Jessica, but I did correspond with her when I was
Did you?
in high school.
Really?
There was something about her, she had what a lot of people call it. She was able to just reach out from that television set, and as a high school student, I remember she was the first non-local news person. I was living in New York. I grew up in New York City. I watched Eyewitness News in New York City, the ABC station. And I remember watching her thinking, I want to do this someday. And I actually wrote to a variety of people in New York, and she was the only one that responded.
There you go.
How about that?
And I still have the letters.
Well, that speaks volumes, doesn't it? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Al Primo, and perhaps any of the other panelists, what's your answer to the people who have stolen your ice cream cone? I'm talking about CNN, Fox, and cable. Do you have an answer to that?
I think what you're asking is, what do I think about people who have stolen the concept? And I'll be brutally frank and candid. When I came to New York, the Channel 7 was the worst, unbelievably bad news operation there. After Eyewitness News, we became the #1 station, and it remains the #1 station to this day. They made me the vice president of news, and my job was to go around to all the ABC stations and put the Eyewitness News format in, which I did, and all 5 of the stations got to be #1. And at that point, I was thinking, I ought to have the opportunity to do this on the network level. I really did. And I had a team that, believed in me, and there was, the competition at that level is just so intense, and so subtle and so encompassing, you don't really get it all. But I get a call from the president of the company one day who says, I want you to go over to the network news. And I said, okay, great, and he said, well, we'd like you to be the executive producer of the Reason Report. And I said, well, you know, I was a producer down in Pittsburgh at KDKA and so forth. I really want to have the opportunity to do what I did for the stations. And I said, well, you know, you're only in your 30s, you're a little young, and we'd like you to. And I said, well, you know, I don't think I want to do that. And then he said, you don't understand, I want you to do that. And so I said, okay. So I went over there, and the president, you know, was Elmer Lauer at that point, and he was about ready to get, you know, resigned, so to speak. And they did take him out, and when they took him out, they put in his number 2 guy, a guy by the name of Bill Sheehan. And Bill Sheehan called me to the office one day and said, well, I'm reorganizing everything, and you know, you're going to be the vice president of news of Washington. And I said, I can't do that. I don't. And he was, well, that's the only job we have for you. And at that point, I decided to come back to my office and pick up the phone, and decided that I was going to put in Eyewitness News at every station in the country, station by station, and I resigned. So I do have a certain amount of gratitude that the concept is there, and I feel like a special person for having that honor. I still wish I would have had the chance to do it on the network, but I left the playbook behind, and they're doing it anyway. So.
Well, we who were involved with Eyewitness News and continue to be cannot thank you enough. As a retiree, I can tell you that it's time for me to go home and take my nap so that I can get up in time for the early bird. And I want also to have all of us put on a party hat if you can. Break up your noisemakers. Let me hear those horns. Let me hear these blowers, because right now we're going to pay tribute to the man who started all this, Al Primo. For he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, and so say all of us, and so say all of us, and so say all of us, for he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, and so say all of us. All right, now you don't